Hey, how's it going? Work. Hey guys.
Welcome to the Dogbus channel, the Dogbusiest channel on YouTube, and this is Wildlife. This is the second bus that I drove across the country from Phoenix to New York. Why would I do such a stupid thing with such an old bus? Well, you'll have to watch my first video to find out some of the reasons for that, and we'll go over the reasons why I still think it was a good idea in this video. I'll also tell you all about how I got this 2000 GMC Savannah-based Bluebird microbird across the country from Phoenix to New York in one piece, the few problems I encountered along the way, the problems I've had since, and of course give you a tour of its unique features. It goes without saying though, I love this bus. Some of you who are schoolie fans, van dwellers, or general transportation or bus nerds might also like to know about some of the differences I found between the manufacturers of my buses. We have 5 buses that come from 3 different manufacturers, and this is a Bluebird, the one behind me, Animals, is a Collins, and we also have a Starcraft, which will have its own video. We have 2 other Collins buses, so you can tell I've settled on one manufacturer for reasons we'll go into another time. So, it was October of 2022, and my wife and I had just been on an absolutely amazing trip to British Columbia, where we did a combination of hiking and portaging and kayaking in a huge wilderness area like nothing we had ever seen before in our lives. And it was incredibly motivating and rejuvenating, and just another way to do something positive coming out of the pandemic. When I got back, I was looking at listings for buses, and this came up. I had bought Animals, if you watched the video about that one, about a year and a half before, and the market had changed a lot by this point. This was a bus that was a junker. It might have cost $2,000, but the price had changed since then. Those of you who are van dweller and schoolie fans might like to know the previous owner lived in this for a year. So I thought based on that, it had to be of at least some sort of quality, because people like that cannot allow themselves to be stranded out in the wilderness. I'd have to admit that it would be true to say that I was captivated by the listing for this bus. I had bought Animals at a used car dealership, not very romantic, but I imagined the adventures that the previous owner of this bus had and deemed it an adventure-worthy bus. Not to mention, all of the buses like this had been pretty much scooped up by that time. The minor problems that I encountered began before I even finished the buying process of the bus. The previous owner had neglected it somewhat because he was no longer a van dweller, and he had a new truck, and he didn't really need to work on this anymore. There was a rag in the oil filler neck instead of a oil cap, and the AC system didn't work as he had said it would, so I had to talk him down a bit. But I had flown all the way to Phoenix, and I was buying this thing, wasn't I? The purchase was also delayed a little bit while the seller had a friend of his come over and test the pressurization of the AC system. He had the proper machines and everything. And he also had a switch that he had just ordered that should make the AC work. So anyway, it didn't work. By this time back in New York, I had developed a pretty good relationship with an actual school bus fleet mechanic that was an authorized dealer for Bluebird and Collins buses. So I figured, what the hell, I'll take a little risk, and when I get back, they can probably fix it, right? So I was on my way. It was a relatively painless process at the MVD, getting registered, and I had to make sure I was insured, even though Arizona doesn't require it. And from there, I headed north to the north rim of the Grand Canyon. The previous time I had done this, I had gone to the south rim, with animals, and so I figured I should see the other side. From there, I went up to Rice Canyon and Capitol Reef National Park as well. From there, I headed to the area of Aspen, Colorado. A former client of ours had moved out there and invited me to stay in her extra cabin. Since it was not yet ski season, it wasn't being rented. And it was also a brand new cabin, and I was going to be the first guest that was going to stay there. Best of all, I got to see her dogs again, and she even let them spend the night in the cabin with me. In the morning, we said our goodbyes after I had walked her dogs a little bit, and I was on my way over the Great Divide. I was definitely a bit nervous about going over the Continental Divide in a bus that's even 6 years older than the last one, but we made it. And at that point, it was official. This bus is legendary. I even saw an old Volvo broken down right before the tunnel at the peak. It had called it quits. But wildlife kept moving. I stayed in a motel in Kansas again, and I also camped in the same areas in Indiana and Maryland again. I figured keep it simple, and I knew it was safe. And I happened to meet the same state park ranger in Indiana the second time I was there, and he seemed to recognize me from about a year ago when I was also there in a bus with temporary registration from Phoenix, which I guess he thought was pretty weird. As you already know, turns out we made it back. No problem. I stopped at an AutoZone type place to buy an oil cap, and that's it. I camped in a bunch of really remote places and had no mechanical trouble of any sort. The owner obviously knew that I was probably going to make it at least so far without refilling the oil or the coolant, and he was right, but I only made it so far. The next day, I went to show this bus to the manager of my business, and she liked it, but she wasn't too impressed. It's old. And she was right. It was out of oil. Right when I was leaving her house, all sorts of things started going haywire, oil pressure dropped, and I was in trouble. Luckily, I had on me the various emergency supplies that I'll show you on the tour, and I added some oil, got down to a gas station, got a little more oil in, and it was okay. So, as usual, this bus proved it can come close to death, but it won't die if you treat it right. So, what was wrong with the bus? Why was it out of oil? Was it just because I had driven it pretty much across the country from Phoenix? Or was there a bigger problem? I made it to the mechanic with no problem, and I wasn't really sure what was wrong, but it made it across the country from Phoenix, so I was willing to deal with whatever it threw at me. It turned out it needed a head gasket on one side. That's a couple of $1,000. That's okay. I love this bus. So let's look at the maintenance log to see what else has happened since then. Other than the head gasket, this bus has had only what could be described as small problems. The head gasket repair seems good. It's holding up. There was a leak in the reservoir for the washer fluid. Okay, replace that. There was a leak in the power steering system. That was fixed. There was a small coolant leak that was actually repaired by a local mechanic, not my fleet mechanic, and that held as well. So I found that, yeah, a few repairs were required, but it fixed the bus and it continued to be reliable. So eventually I decided, okay, we're going to fix the air conditioning system, which is the biggest risk. An air conditioning system on a bus like this, if it's truly defunct and none of the parts are working correctly, can cost many, many, many thousands of dollars. But it turned out that all that happened was one of the hooks that was mounted on the side of the bus had a screw that was going through a wire, and that wire was the on-off switch effectively for the system, and otherwise it was perfectly intact. I was lucky as hell. After the air conditioning was fixed, I continued to have a few problems. The bus actually died on me in a couple of locations. It seemed to be starving for fuel. But it was no major fuel pump replacement or anything like that, just a circuit board. And actually, well, life is tough enough, they had to replace that circuit board twice, but After the second one, the repair held, and it's still good. Most recently, I took it in to try and see what I could do to make sure that it starts perfectly every time. And what they did was replace the crankshaft position sensor. I had asked them to perhaps replace the starter, and they said, no, you don't need to do that, which is something I appreciate, because why spend money on something that I don't have to? The bus does start every single time these days, and sometimes it's just a matter of a couple of extra seconds. So maybe I shouldn't worry too much. All right, now it's time to take you on a tour of W1LDLIFE and show you its unique features that set it apart from our other buses. First, some of you may have noticed that this is a very, very, very terrible paint job, but it's better than the no paint that was there before, and I'm not quite ready to spend many thousands of dollars painting this bus. There's also holes from where there used to be mirrors mounted on the corners. Those are called crossover mirrors in the bus world. It has an awning, which I never use, but that would be nice if I take it camping. The Bluebird bus does have the best shape of the buses. Here's some holes from where there used to be probably a stop sign arm. Maybe I'll get those fixed somehow one day. And there's the terrible paint on the hood again. This is the old GMC grille. This is how you set it apart from any of the more modern vans out there. There's not too many of these still around, but you do see them running. And we can go on board. So when I bought this bus, the seats had actually all been removed because the owner was living in it. But I needed a bus with seats. So this is probably one of the few cases in which somebody bought one of these very old buses and actually put seats back in it. Usually it's the other way around. Now what I chose is something very unusual. These are seats that I bought on Craigslist that actually come from a wider bus. And as you can see, they fold up. Only the ones behind me are fixed. So this is an extremely flexible bus. I can carry almost anything in here and keep it dry. And it's, for somebody like me, an absolutely wonderful thing. Well, folks, my wife just got home and she tells me that one of our drivers reports the air conditioning isn't working on puppies. That's the Starcraft bus we mentioned earlier, which also happens to be based on a Ford van. And there's a reason we only have one of those. Anyway, because we have these backup buses, I'll be able to take it in right away tomorrow and we'll get it fixed. Long live animals. Alright, now let me show you how these folding seats work. And before you think that I actually installed these, it's definitely not the case. I actually brought them to a professional welding shop that works on much, much larger heavy machinery than this, and they determined the safe way and proper way to install them. So this is how they fold down. And just like that, you can carry a bunch of passengers. All right, let's review some of the safety equipment that I've taken on my trips. Some of these things I bought on my third trip. Believe it or not, I did this again. And there will be another video about that in this series. So this is a 12-volt tire inflator. We have a full bottle of coolant. I would also have oil with me. This is a set of jumper cables. And this is a battery booster pack. These things are awesome. I highly recommend them. I have 2 of them actually. And then we have a 12-ton bottle jack. That's a bit excessive for this bus, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I wouldn't want to carry the minimal thing, and we need to make sure that it has enough clearance to get this very high frame off the ground. When it comes to changing tires, it's good to have a tire chock. This may not be perfect, but you can usually find something in the environment too. And then a nice big lug wrench like this is really important to get off tight lug nuts. If you have one of those ones that's just one handle, it's almost impossible even on your average car. I don't know why they even bother giving those to people. This is the best. So the main thing about this bus is that it ultimately allowed me to put animals, which is parked over there, into regular service. And it was the first time ever that I had 2 buses running full time. And it was a big change for my business after, you know, a decade and more even of kind of doing the same thing, always trying to improve. And that's what these buses represent too. So thanks for watching, and let me know if there's anything that you want to know about this bus or our other buses. And there will be at least a few more videos in this series, one for each of our other buses. And I hope you'll like and subscribe so that I know that you want to see more. Thanks for watching.